Welcome to Conservatives Talk. My name's Justin.
And this is Jamie. And this week we're going to talk about OCU trying to bring CRT to Floyd County, Biden and his gun registry list, as well as Governor Kemp actually makes us the 25th state to bring constitutional carry.
Go GGO.
Also, we're going to talk about Stacy Abrams and Fair Fight, Georgia going to court this week.
And welcome back. As always, we always encourage everyone to like and share all of our content that we produce and subscribe to all of our platforms that we have out there. And if you're able to, please go to conservativestalk.org, and it's spelled out right below you here, where you can see exactly where to go with that. And help us be able to sponsor and send this content out and make more content to where we're able to send it out and have a wider broadcast and wider voice with this. 5, 10, 15, 25, whatever you can afford, help us to be able to do this, because if we're not able to do this, we're not going to be able to really rebuild the red wall and to make sure that Georgia stays red, as we all know that it was even in 2020.
Absolutely. And always remember, we're one of, if not the only, conservative media outlet going on right now.
The true conservative media outlet.
Correct. And just as a general reminder, as we always do every show, remember there's 38 days until the primary, so make sure that you're ready for that, because we need to
May 24th.
Continue to put in good Republicans. And we are 208 days away from the general and beating Stacey Abrams again.
I love that. That's just music to my ears to hear that every single week.
Every time.
Beating Stacey Abrams once again. Maybe this time she'll take the hint and just go away into obscurity.
And we're going to get more than that a little bit later on.
Just a tad bit.
So we're going to do a little reversal. Let's start local.
Yes, exactly. So typically we go national, state, and then local. But first off, we've got a little bone to pick with an issue that's going on here in Floyd County. Although I will say there was a piece of legislation that was passed in this past general session that kind of took care of a lot of this.
And once again, thank you to our General Assembly.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Thank you,
all of
legislators.
Yeah.
But I will say, even beforehand and even since that law being passed, there may be still some of these instances that pass through, because you still have some of these people in these places that will allow for this to move through. And
I will say this is an isolated issue for Northwest Georgia, but it's not necessarily an isolated issue across the state. You know, we've heard about this, especially in the Atlanta metro area, but this is the first time that something like this has happened behind the red wall, and we feel like it was somewhat converted. And we've been hearing about it a little bit, and again,
not just hearing about it a little bit. We've had people yelling from the top of their lungs for the past almost year now about this.
Correct. And what I mean by hearing about it a little bit is, like, you didn't hear any local media come out with it. Like, it was a media silence. Like, and for us, we didn't find out about it until recently, and that was because, like, you know, some of our listeners, some of the parents of the particular high school this incident occurred, had not heard or not seen anything done necessarily about it,
or even addressed at all.
Now, I will say this, and Justin's going to argue with me about this, but I think
of course, I mean, would you expect any less?
You know, I think before we get into the issue at all, before anyone like tries to jump down their throat, I just want to make this known. I think our school superintendent, our school board,
though,
and our county school board did everything they could based upon the situation as it occurred. And, you know, Justin disagrees because he's Justin. But I think that they were in the right in this and how they handle it, because when something like this occurs, like up front in your face, and it's different from what was originally presented to you, like, you're left with limited options. So let's kind of dabble in what actually happened, because what actually happened takes us back to May of last year. Right?
So, and the high school that we're speaking about was Coosa High School. Coosa High School had, the principal there had reached out to an organization here in Floyd County called One Community United. One Community United was, in all honesty, ultimately founded with the greatest of intention. However, as most things are, with the greatest of intentions, they can ultimately turn out to be some of the worst things that come out.
Look, I've had people reach out to me, and they were talking about this organization, and again, like, you know what I mean, at first I'd heard some of the similar opinions that Justin was just talking about, that, you know, they were founded with good intentions. It originally was supposed to be something that was genuine and bipartisan, as in true, just to try to unite one community. But I had people reach out to me, and they were like, "Do you know this is like turning into some Marxist organization? Like
Yes.
they're like full commie, full like socialist, full like ideology by the book, democratic policy of what you
Absolutely.
see. Like they are no different than Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden out the gate."
Outside of a very, 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 very minority
Like
party.
0.01%.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the conservative factor within an organization is about as much as the gay and trans gay and trans organizations or those people within the American population. That's about the extent of how much of the conservative
Which is both
is in
still
that group.
0.01%.
Exactly.
Which
So
is, that leads into another factor. But, you know, we're not going to get into that.
Anyway, so last year, they had Coosa High School had reached out to OCU, and they were wanting to do something to really bring all the students together and to really, again, best of intention. They wanted to get everybody together. That they really wanted to emphasize everybody's cultures, everybody's beliefs, and things along that nature. It was a great deal, and
Great intent.
I'm all about everybody coming in and coming together and uniting behind a single issue. That's great.
Correct.
That's awesome. That's
I'm
America.
all for mitigation in America and finding some kind of middle ground.
Mm-hmm.
But what?
So let's get into exactly what they did. So they actually came into the schools in an 8th grade classes, and this was just this was the
So
lowest
was it 8th grade or was it high
8th grade.
school?
It was
See,
so they had 8th grade students in the high school class.
let's explain that part too, because a lot of times here when you talk about high school, like some places junior high is 6th and 7th grade, but
Yes.
a lot of times in Georgia, middle school, which is why it's defined differently, goes through 8th grade.
Yes.
But in this situation in particular, this was with 8th graders,
Yes.
and this is where this gets truly messy and disgusting.
Yes. Can you imagine this outside organization that has not been vetted to any level? They have had absolutely zero training whatsoever. They have just essentially they've had nothing more than indoctrination. They've had nothing more than just people telling them that they're repressed, that they have every meaning and every right to do what they did, but they did not get any sort of parental consent. They did not get any sort of permission outside of some of the students that they asked to participate within this, as far as students coming up and making these presentations.
And some of these students these were not college graduates. These were college students.
College students. They
who were asked to do these presentations.
They had no formal education. They were still getting a formal education. Yeah, they had no training, no vetting, nothing along that line. Yet they were able to come into the schools in Floyd County and ask 8th grade children to lay their heads down on a desk and to raise their hands if they felt like they may be gay, queer, trans, the LGBTQ, A, B, C, D, F, G type of deal.
So I do want to be clear about this too. So from what we've gathered from this information is that even before this incident happened, they presented it to the faculty.
Yes.
And the faculty said that there's some things that you need to change before you come back.
Absolutely.
We understand the situation that we're in. We understand what you're trying to do, but we suggest that you change this. And not only did they not change it, they made it worse.
Yes, and the presentation that they made the faculty was along the lines that they initially intended to actually present to the students and to incorporate throughout the entire school there. However, as Jamie mentioned, there were there were more than a couple faculty members with an anonymous, more or less, questionnaire sheet that said that they had reservations about this moving forward and going to the students and being able to really incorporate this into the school system. And that's actually something that we are going to really flesh out a lot more in the coming, well, I would say probably within the next week or so. We're actually going to put together an entire timeline involving this from the start to beginning, from when the when the principal of Coosa High School reached out to this organization until after a parent found out about what happened there and came back to the principal and started questioning the principal about this and recording the answers from the principal. You will see that everything that happened in that school, I can promise you right now, if it doesn't turn your stomach, then it's re-examine some things.
And to kind of take a step back, like, you know what I mean, how did this information get to us and how did this get on the show?
Yes.
Because what ended up happening was Justin and I had no idea that any of this happened last year.
Who would?
No one had, like, no local paper did any news article about it. Nothing. So how this started was some parents had heard about our show. And some parents knew us from, you know, our other adventures. And
adventures, that's a good word to put it.
Adventures, that's the best way to think about it. But they had reached out and they said, look, we've filed all these open records requests. We have over 400 pages of it, and no one will do anything about it. Will y'all at least take a look at this and see if this is something that y'all will be willing to report on? And as we kept going through this information, we kept finding out just like, honestly, some heinous things that are going on. And then to come to find out that this was actually reported by the Georgia and Tennessee Star. So you can go back to December of last year and see where the Tennessee Star, this means the state of Tennessee, did an article on this before the local paper did.
The local paper are still yet to do anything about it.
Correct.
Yeah, there has been no local media coverage about this. There has been no statewide media coverage about this outside of the conglomerate of both the Tennessee and the Georgia Star. And
this is right out of the CRT, the woke Democrat nonsense that's been going on is like, let's indoctrinate and groom people from the beginning, and this is what they did. And honestly, not in my county. So not going to happen.
It gets even deeper than that. So it was not the actual organization that came in and did this. They did come in, they did this. However, it was a teacher at Coosa High School that came in and asked these students to participate in this. What really makes it even worse is that when these volunteers with OCU, these uneducated, these unvetted,
undereducated, untrained.
No, we'll call them uneducated, and that's what they are, and untrained, unvetted, any sort of, you name it. They then saw these professors or these teachers asking these students to do it, so they said, okay, well that must be okay, that must be fine. So then they took it to the next level. They then began to ask these students, Have you ever seen your parents take part in any sort of a racist rallies? Have they been to any Trump meetings? Have they been to any conservative gatherings? Anything along that line? And they really started to try and pin conservatives or Republicans as being nothing more than racist
and homophobic, which is clearly not the case.
Absolutely not.
You know what I mean? Like, which is, and I got to reiterate that, clearly not the case. But they again are following the same propaganda that the Democratic Party has been trying to portray for a long time. Is that
keeping them on the farm,
that exactly that the conservative movement is racist and homophobic, which is the furthest thing from the truth. And so once again, this is another issue to where they are trying to indoctrinate, and again I say doctrinate and groom young kids
I
to
love
believe
that word, that grooming. I love that,
because that's what it is. Like, you know what I mean, that's what it is. You see it. You see it all the time.
That is the best word to describe what they're doing right now.
I just can't believe that this happened in our own backyard.
For really, Floyd County of anywhere, and it's the Board of Education that allowed for this to go on.
I disagree with that. I just have to disagree with
that. So let's continue a little bit more because again, it gets deeper. So the Floyd County Board of Education, when they found out about this, and the superintendent, Glenn White, said, okay, we heard about this, we're looking into it, and admittedly, they did a good job. But they said, okay, OCU, we understand what you're trying to do with this. Back off. You're not allowed back on campus anymore within any of the school organizations because of what happened with us. However, when push came to shove, they buckled and allowed OCU back on campus.
So this is, for those of you who do know, this is what they did report on. Ironically,
yes, go figure.
During Halloween, the local paper reported about an incident that happened at Coosa High School about some kids who came in their Halloween attire, dressed in MAGA gear, and then I'll call them opposition students came in dressed in BLM, and it caused a ruckus. That's the best way to put it. It was a little
high school.
High school. That's just what happens. You know what I mean? I remember when I was in high school, like, I don't know about you, but I went to Model. And at Model High School, when I was in school,
I did not go to Model.
It was you had a certain class of people, and then you had another class of people who just didn't like each other for various reasons, one being race. And then you had my group of friends who had to fight both of them because, that's just not something that we put up with. That's how I view the conservative movement is, you have certain people who that's what they tether to on both sides of the aisle. And then you have what I call the conservative movement, which is those who say that, we don't care about any of that. We don't care about what your skin color is. We don't care about your sexual preference. We don't care about like what you are. Do you believe in God? Do you believe in certain values? Do you believe that this country needs to go a certain way? And then that's the direction that we feel that the conservative movement needs to move.
Yes,
into.
Absolutely.
And so, anyway, bringing it back, this is what kind of occurred at Coosa High School, and OCU was brought back in, and
after they had been banned for instance,
or
being participatory in this CRT deal, and really bringing in something that should have never been inside of these classrooms to begin with. So it wasn't just that they did the heads down, hands up deal, and it wasn't just about anything involving showing up to these rallies or anything like that. They began discussing these untrained, unvetted, uneducated personnel began discussing the George Floyd movement, talking about how racist police officers were. They began discussing several things that they had absolutely zero business coming in and discussing this with some of the most influential minds out there. They had absolutely no part in doing any of this whatsoever.
Yep.
And the fact that they had been banned from these campuses, but yet when push came to shove and when they should have stood behind that ban, the county board or the Floyd County School Board buckled and they receded from their initial deal. And I know this gives James some heartburn.
It does.
But at the same time, you have to be willing to stand by your principles. If you're not willing to stand by your principles, then you're not willing to stand for anything.
Look, here's the thing. Our Board of Education is led by strong conservatives.
You say.
They're not weak conservatives.
So you say.
And I stand by that. I stand by that statement. They are strong conservatives. Now,
you also know the curriculum they're getting that they were talking about bringing in.
Before we get into that, that's somewhat naive.
I'll admit that.
What I think about our board is, I think that they were. I'll put it this way: what other organization would they have gone to try to talk about racial issues?
Well, in all honesty, I'm not entirely sure. They could have at least reached out to a group that was credentialed, that was vetted, which
is true. And there's some things that we still are looking into about the part of OCU that went into the school versus what they say the larger organization is. And again, we've been looking into this matter for a minute.
Yes.
And what OCU has been trying to say is that, that was a small sect of our organization, not leadership. But we've come to find that may be a little bit different than what we originally
especially heard. Since leadership was aware of the entire thing the entire time and actually was there and present during the entire thing.
Which is what we're still trying to – we're going to get to the bottom of that.
Yes. So keep an eye on our website. Again, go to conservativestalk.org, and we will have a new section that is going to be coming up with this. Again, detailing every single instance that happened, every open record request that has come out of this, everything that has been provided to us, every testimony, every witness statement, and even some statements that will remain anonymous will be in there as well.
And look, part of the reason why we're bringing this to the show is this is one of those things. like something that Justin hinted at earlier, is that we're going to make sure that you're aware of.
Yes.
Because like there's certain things that we can do and that we do behind the scenes that a lot of people aren't aware of, but we want to make sure that you're there, because we're here to make sure that you're aware that this is real, that some of the
Yes.
things that are going on in Virginia and Atlanta can happen in Northwest Georgia, can happen in your home county, and it
And
just go,
is happening in Floyd.
and it's going to take more than us to just stand up for it. So you
Mhm.
need to be at your county commission meetings. You need to be at your board of education
Yes.
meetings, both city and county if you're in Floyd County. You need to be at your election board meetings. You need to be there and be present, because your attendance at these things, your awareness of these things, is the only way that you can stop it.
So it's kind of along the same things that are along the same line as I say involved in the voting thing. If you're not involved, it's your fault.
That's it. If you don't vote, if you don't get out there, if you're not present, then these things that every one of us says that we're against is going to come right down our throat, and then we're going to sit back and go, "What happened?" And you're not going to be able to look at me and Justin or anybody else and say that we didn't warn you, because we literally created a show to warn you.
Exactly. Yeah. Our entire platform is to get you the information so then you can act and to allow you to be able to have an idea of what you can do to not only improve nationally, but statewide and in your own hometown. So let's get to a little, well, I want to say a little bit lighter news. But,
Not yet.
But not quite. So our great, I want to call him fearless leader, but is he really that? I mean, a bird.
Fearful leader.
Well, I hate to call him a leader because I mean, even still, a bird crapped on his shoulder in his little speech the other day.
I
So,
respect the office.
although I will say that can be seen as a sign of good luck.
I respect the office, but Sleepy Joe has proven once again that he is not in touch with the American people.
Not just the American people, but truth in general. So if you're not aware, I like the term. Sleepy Joe actually came out and announced that he was going to be instituting something through the ATF, which is an organization that essentially formed outside of congressional purview, although, or excuse me, with that formed outside of direct congressional purview.
Because correct me if I'm wrong,
there's a lot of history behind that.
Yeah,
but still.
timelines and history go back and forth with me. I don't
Yes.
remember what year it is or anything like that. But like, it wasn't this formed really to get Bonnie and Clyde and Al Capone.
Exactly, more or less. It was initially formed to get rid of moonshiners.
Just another bureaucracy chapter that was created out of no reason, but just to stop the government have the government try to stop something, private industry,
Absolutely,
from reigning.
absolutely.
Again, the government's ruined 401ks, they've ruined everything.
Yeah. So if you're not aware, Biden has actually came out and instituted a new rule that said that or that essentially banned ghost guns. When I say ghost guns, essentially it eliminates the ability for Americans to be able to produce and manufacture their own firearms in their own homes, in their own workshops, in their own backyards, in their own shops, without first asking Big Brother if it's okay. Every firearm component now produced or manufactured or finished or anything along that line now has to be serialized through the ATF.
So what this means is basically, right, like
They can track every piece of your gun.
every piece of it. So it doesn't matter how I modify it, how I change it out. Like my barrel now has to have a serial number on it.
Mm-hmm. That firearm that's sitting right there on the on our bookshelf there, that right there would have at least 5 or 6 serial numbers that have to come onto it now. I mean, you can't see them on camera, but we kicked it back and forth. But I mean, there's about 6 different ghost guns sitting off camera right now that you can't see.
So like, and I asked this question off camera. What does it matter if the serial numbers don't even match? Like, just so that you can go back and
it's all about being Gucci, baby.
Like, that's dumb.
Mm-hmm. So we'll use this firearm right here for an example. So you have that lower right there, and it has 1 serial number on it. Well, that lower can be interchanged with at least, I would say, at least 2,000 different uppers. Now, under this new administration, or this new ruling with this administration, every single one of those uppers has to come with a serial number. So I cannot, under any circumstances, have a piece of that firearm right there that the government does not know about.
So I don't know. Here's my thing, right? And again, I love guns, but I like to shoot guns.
Well, you're
I'm
American.
You know what I mean? But I'm a novice when it comes to the manufacturing side of them, the history, that kind of thing. And so,
and I've built all these in the room, by the way.
And so my question here is to be blunt with it, what does it matter? Like, you know what I mean? Like if it's not like these are these registered together? You know what I mean? Like the lower part, is it registered with the upper part? Is that how it's supposed to work?
They will be now if you buy them whole. But for instance, if you have to, so essentially the registered part under the former ATF ruling was the actual firearm. That was the gun. So the lower part of that weapon right there was the actual gun. The where you pulled the trigger with the hand guard, that was the actual gun. The upper was just an accessory.
Gotcha.
Now the accessories even have to be serialized.
That's stupid.
And this is all in an attempt for Joe Biden to more or less say, well, we're trying to reduce violence that's going on because of the rise in crime and ghost guns. Criminals don't use ghost guns.
Look, I grew up in,
and a criminal. Well, even still, a criminal doesn't care if a firearm has a serial number on it at all. If it comes with a serial number, I can guarantee you it's not going to have one for long.
How do I put this?
Be careful.
The most gentlest way. I know. I grew up. So anyone who knows anything about Atlanta,
Jamie still played in the fifth on this one, by the way.
I grew up on what we call Bolton Road. Bolton Road runs into Fulton Industrial in Atlanta, and I went to an elementary school for a time period called GA Towns. It is not the best neighborhood in the world. If you really want to give some reference for people who may know, I grew up a block away from what's known as the Blue Flame. So that should give you enough reference, right? People there don't care what the serial number is, if they even know what the serial number is. I don't even think if it even has a serial number. You know, so like this is just nonsense. This is, again, my biggest problem is the Democratic Party is going after the wrong people. They create these gun policies, these gun laws that do nothing but harm good American citizens who are just trying to purchase guns legally to protect their families.
Yeah, and to make sure that Big Brother doesn't know that they have it because they don't want to be a part of this National Gun Registry. So that's the biggest part of this, is by stamping every part of that firearm right there, it is literally creating a national registry to where at any point in time they can pull it right up and say, okay, well, this person has all of these firearms and all these accessories, and they live at this address, so they look like they've got a little bit too much for us to be comfortable and feel safe in our little high seats. Exactly.
You just answered the $1 million question there. That's what they're doing, because they know if they come out and they say we're creating a national registry, the American people are going to go crazy.
Absolutely.
But if they say, but like to a novice myself, and they come out and say, oh, we're just going to add another serial number to it, you know what I mean? To a novice, you're going to go, what's the point?
We're serializing all the firearms that didn't have serial numbers to begin with.
Because that sounds fair. When the reality is it's not. You're creating a national registry for every piece of it.
Exactly. That's the whole intent behind this. That's the whole issue behind all this. They say that it's to be able to trace these firearms and to find the people and the culprits in these crimes and these murders and everything that they're saying are being committed by these ghost guns. It's not that. It's to be able to trace and track where every firearm or every single little round has gone out throughout America. They're able to track it. They're able to trace it. They're able to find it, and they will come and they will get it one of these days.
Awful.
Or if we allow them to, anyway.
Well, we need to push back on this, and I hope that our House and Senate representatives, soon to be Senate representatives in the state of Georgia, because clearly our two.
Well, there's nothing they can do at that point, because it's all federal now.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
And
clearly,
it's outside of the purview of Congress, because Congress actually allowed for the ATF to be created, and they passed under the NFA. It allows for the ATF to create these kind of rules, and because of the organization of the NRA and the bump stock movement, it allowed for people to it allowed for the ATF to really kind of open up this door to really create these type of deals, because the NRA said, well, if we kind of step back and allow them to have this one, then it'll be okay. That's all they're going to go for. Well,
Wow.
no. If you take an inch, then they're going to take a mile.
Not to swell your head up a little bit, but you just taught me something. That's very interesting, because you know, when you really think about it, you're right. Like, this is one of those things that sits outside of Congress. So, like, they could pass a bill down the road, but this is one of those things, like an executive order, that immediately goes into effect because it's a bureaucracy who implements it.
It's one of those alphabet agencies with pure,
God, that's awful.
with pure organization and
Autonomy.
law-making powers outside
Just
of
pure
the
autonomy,
legislative branch.
outside of the law, which is something that, you know, not to go down the rabbit hole, because the rabbit hole's not on this show, but that goes back into like these ghost courts and all this other kind of stuff that you hear.
Yes. The FISA courts and everything. Yeah,
correct. It's just this nonsense that we've allowed for the executive branch every other term or every other cycle to come in and create this bureaucratic mess.
Oh, I'm sure they're probably watching us now on this one.
I don't care if you're not on a registry right now.
You're not right.
You're not really trying to protect the American people.
I'll give you that one. So let's get into the next topic that along the same lines as the Second Amendment. And
but this is a happier topic.
This is a very happy topic.
This is a happier topic.
I want to say it loud and I want to say it proud. Georgia is now a it is a permit-free carry state. Not quite constitutional, but it is now a permit-free carry state. If it were constitutional, then technically, if you were 18 years old, then you could carry without a firearms license. But, you know, the GA2A, outside of that topic, they're a piece of junk. Don't just get outside of them.
There's a lot to cheer for, and I don't.
There is absolutely,
and I don't want to
absolutely.
And you know, I mean, we are and I will say it. We are the 25th state to approve constitutional carry, which is a major thing. We are now half the union, which is allowing for the right that we were actually given to carry a firearm. And I thank the Georgia Assembly, both chambers, and the governor for getting this done.
Or was it a God-given right that was restricted by government?
It was a God-given right that was restricted by government.
Okay.
But
I just want to clarify on top.
But so we're clear, and I'm just going to make this very clear, Governor Kemp and the Georgia Assembly is what made our right free again.
Well, if you're over 21. But I digress.
If you're free again. And I will say our friends at Georgia Gun Owners, I will say at Georgia Assembly, both chambers, House and Senate. You know, another friend of ours, Jason Avatarde, was part of this to get it through the Senate, and then they were able to actually come to an agreement because both chambers actually felt that this was something that needed to be done. So instead of doing what a lot of times is done, one bill gets picked over the other, or one bill gets modified and the other one dropped, they were able to combine both of these to create a good piece of legislation that can be worked on in the future. But, you know, we talk about with laws, you know, grab that inch when you can. That way you can expand on it later.
I'm all about the mile.
I'm all about the mile. And so now we have the ability to make the mile because we are the 25th state to pass constitutional carry.
So what actually happened just this week? So when Governor Kemp signed in this piece of legislation, essentially what it did on the Senate bill, it allowed for anyone over the age of 21, if you would be able to carry or you would be able to receive a concealed carry license, you are now able to carry without ever having to go through the permit process and getting that licensure and that permit. The House bill actually came in and it said that we will then recognize other states' licensures and the ability from people from other states to be able to do it as well. So, as you said, it was a perfect meeting between the two. So the Senate bill created the right for Georgians. The House bill created the right for other American citizens across the country. So it was, as he said, the perfect union. So you may be asking when this goes into effect. So it actually went into effect when the bill was signed. So when Governor Kemp got down and put pen to paper, it was officially effective at that moment.
Which, for those of you who don't know, which is why that little detail is very important, is depending on the bill, a lot of times, government operates from June and July.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times what will happen is things won't go into effect until July 1.
Yes.
So which is another, kudos to the governor and the assembly, because now, immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Once he signed it, it was immediately into effect. You are now able to carry without a permit, but as me and Justin have discussed privately, a permit still may be useful in other places.
Yes. So if you don't have a permit, I am still 100% an advocate of getting a permit, simply because if you intend to purchase a firearm in the future, or you intend to carry your firearm concealed outside the state of Georgia, in order to be able to do that, you still need a permit, not to purchase, but to carry outside the state. If you're intending to purchase, having that carry permit there allows for you to essentially bypass the background check, the waiting period, anything along the line. You can be in and out of the store in 10 to 15 minutes if you know what you're going in, you have your card in hand, you fill out the paperwork, they fill it out, you get everything copied, you're in and out in 10, 15 minutes. That's if you have the concealed carry license from the state already. So if you're
Against my own wishes.
That's what I would recommend doing.
Against my
I
own
will
wishes.
intend on keeping my my concealed carry permit up to date.
Against my own wishes, I will say, it probably is best, especially if you're
Jamie's
like me.
going to get one.
I don't like permits. I think they're wrong. I think some permits are wrong. Like, and you're talking from someone who understands the whole process and the purpose for them.
He's a bureaucrat.
Whatever. Anyway, your carry permit still serves a purpose.
It does. It absolutely does.
You
Especially
see how I hated saying that?
outside the state of Georgia. Yes.
Outside the state of Georgia. Inside the state of Georgia, we're free.
Mm-hmm.
Just be cautious when you go to other states. Our neighbors aren't so lucky.
Well, no. Well, Alabama's trying to. They're trying to pull something off, but Tennessee's got it. The Tennessee recognizes our carry permit. Alabama recognizes our carry permit. Louisiana, Mississippi, all essentially the South recognizes our carry permit. Several states above us recognize it, but not every state. So again, if you're traveling somewhere, ensure that you check your local laws and regulations before you go there, so you don't find yourself on the wrong end of the law.
Just be cautious.
Yes. It's something that carrying a firearm is a responsibility, so you need to be responsible in knowing the laws around that and do that within the confines of where you are going to be carrying.
Absolutely, and that's a good point to make. We get very excited when we talk about guns on this show,
Mm-hmm.
but again, as we talk about every time we talk about guns, it is a responsibility that not only do you need to maintain, but need to pass down, because
Absolutely.
people can be reckless with guns, and it's the people that are the problem, not the gun.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more on that one. It really makes me smile to think now that I actually have someone that I work with that now actually carried their firearm for the first time into the office today
That's
because
exciting.
they didn't have a carry permit, and now they're legally able to carry that. So they felt a lot safer, and they were actually I was able to teach them a couple of things about it and be able to explain a couple of things and be able to really share that experience with them and to educate them somewhat on it.
That's exciting. Like Future said, like I say from what Future said, I no longer have to keep my Draco sealed in a book bag.
He may or may not actually have one.
We're not talking about what I own. That being said, I kind of want to spend a little bit more time than what we talked about with this next topic.
Yes,
because I find this
interesting.
very interesting when you start comparing what this person is actually doing about something from 2018 and what occurred in 2020. And
Yes.
You being the law student, I'm gonna let you lead into this one.
So, Stacy Abrams in 2018, after she claimed she won the election, filed a lawsuit. Well, 3.5 years later, the federal courts are actually willing to take it up and allow it to be heard.
Garbage.
Yeah, especially when you noticed that when President Trump filed lawsuits around this, similar
Along the
issues,
same lines.
yeah,
Like
they dismissed him immediately.
we're talking about there are a lot of similarities in between the lawsuits that Trump tried to file and the lawsuit
Hmm.
that Stacey Abrams tried to file.
Well, not just Trump, but citizens in the state of Georgia. Actually, someone we had on the show earlier
Yep.
filed a lawsuit that was almost explicitly, well, actually was 100% explicitly along the same lines that this lawsuit is indicating, and they threw his out.
And
Uh,
before we get into that, think about
our,
this.
our attorney general actually sided with the Democrat Party and tossing it
Thi-
out.
think about this, right?
I'm
Imagine.
sorry, I had to throw the plug in there.
Ugh.
Well, if he hadn't have done it, then it wouldn't have been said.
Imagine this. Imagine the same grievances that you have had, the same grievances that we've talked about this
Mhm.
show about, same grievances that we've gone to the now former Board of Elections in Floyd County and surrounding counties about, the same issues that we've had with voters coming from various places and, you know what I mean, absentee ballots, all this kind of stuff. Imagine if your issue was dismissed,
Yeah.
but Stacey Abrams' issue was actually being heard in court.
Well, she does have a sister that sits on this court that it's being heard for. So it's not her sister that's hearing it, but her sister does sit on this
So
court.
let's get into the case. Tell us,
Okay.
tell our listeners a little bit about the case.
So what this is Verified is they filed a case that opposed a litany of issues that occurred or that they claim occurred in 2018. There have been multiple issues within that lawsuit that the federal judge has said, look, that's full of junk. You have no basis on this. I'm tossing it out. And those issues include the long lines at voting locations. They said that essentially was racist and that needs to be done away with. The
Remember
poll
that.
working training.
Yep.
They said that the poll workers within that place were not trained to the level they needed to be, and that they weren't able to process these lines through quickly enough, that they weren't able to really bring these people in and out and to really expedite the process more or less. That that the ballot rejections that happened were done so in a way that was inconsistent and that they were not done to the high enough standard that they believed that they should have been adhered to. And that's another key topic that we're going to bring up here in a minute. And they had tossed out or at least the federal judge had tossed out the use it or lose it policy, which is essentially if you're not voting for a certain period of time, then you're going to lose your registration, because if you're not voting, then
you need to re-register.
exactly. The Secretary of State has no idea if you are actually living there in that location, if you are even in the same state, if you are dead, alive, anything along that line.
Which is one thing that we tried to push for, is because so for all of you who don't know, you have to, when you change your address, you file that with the post office, right?
Yes.
And you know,
And your voter registration office.
and your voter registration office. So
You're supposed
typically,
to.
you're supposed to, right? But
And
there's
actually the Department of Driver Services too. By
correct.
law. You're
By
supposed
law,
to.
you're supposed to. Now in Georgia, that gets a little messy because there is your primary address is what's supposed to be on your license.
Permanent domicile.
Your permanent domicile is what's supposed to be on your license, but that name may not be the place where you reside at, which is something that needs to be fixed in the state of Georgia, right? But I will agree upon that. But that does not fix your voter registration issue. Well, your voter registration, that's supposed to be where you predominantly reside. And so when you go to change your voter registration, you necessarily don't have to change your driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that the DMV has recognized. Now, if you do completely move and you're not in that same domain anymore, for those people who have two houses within the same state, if you do completely move and you're not in that domain anymore, then you just need to file with your voter registration, which leads into a lot of this issues that we're kind of discussing in this case. So I wrote something down, which I think is very important because I know I wrote it down. I marked it, which makes it very important. When we start talking about part of this lawsuit, right? It's saying that part of this lawsuit was racist because it is basically affects more African Americans than it does anyone else, right? And one thing that I've been looking at is how many of these local elections offices are actually ran by African Americans that they're trying to say where the voter registration wasn't changed due to some racist issue. You know, because I know from personal experience that when I went to change my voter registration, when I moved from my a permanent address to where my permanent residence was, that when I asked for my voter registration to be changed, when I went to the election, when I went up there to change it, they never changed it. The card either never got sent to the state or some issue occurred there. So, and that office is primarily
I was about to ask, what
ran.
race was that?
You know what I mean? That office is primarily ran by African Americans. So
They just knew you were a Republican. That's what it was.
you know, I brought that argument up with someone who tried to fight me about it, but that's a whole nother
That
ballgame.
wasn't me.
You know, because that goes back to this whole case, right? So how can you prove that this was some kind of racist issue about it and sue the Secretary of State for it on these bases when you haven't even adhered to or listed what the race of all these accused election officers are?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So let's cut into the meat of exactly what it is of this entire conglomerate of a lawsuit. What is actually left going before the judge for this issue? So there are essentially three prongs with this. The first one being that they are opposing the exact matching for the signatures on absentee ballots, meaning that if you had registered to vote and the ID that you used, your driver's license, social security card, whatever, did not match the name or the name that was on the ID that you presented in order to go in to vote, then you were not allowed to cast that ballot. You were essentially allowed to cast a provisional ballot that you would then have to come in and cure and prove that you lived in the state and you lived where you said you did. And that in of itself, they're accusing of being racist because they said that it affect of this. They said 70% of the people that were rejected based upon their absentee ballots were African American, but at the same time, you didn't have to. There were no ID requirements for absentee ballots at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So that also kind of raises a couple of red flags there.
It also raises the fact to me that in 2020, I know this: the Republican Party got the list of people who hadn't cured their ballot.
Yes.
Didn't know who voted, who they voted for, or anything down ticket. But it was essentially a movement that around 8,000 people in the state of Georgia in different regions had to cure their ballot. And so how
it 47,000 in 2018.
47,000
as opposed to
as what they're arguing. 47,000 versus
they've shown that 47. Well, it shows that 47,000 ballots or 47,000 voters that submitted these ballots were rejected because of mismatched ID information.
So my question is if the Republicans can have their people go cure the ballots because we only get Republican lists, how come the Democrats didn't do it?
It's a good question, but I think the bigger question on that is how did it go from 47,000 to 8,000?
Correct, because it was less than that in 2020 from the even on the Democrat side.
How did it go from 47,000 on both sides to 8,000 in 2 years? I can tell you why. It's called a consent agreement.
And well, not only that, why? I'm just still curious at the fact that
it already cured that issue, according to the Democrats.
But between 2018 and 2020, which again is another reason why we believe this lawsuit is fallible.
It's bogus.
You know what I mean? But in that, like, I just don't understand. Like, if there's an issue with the ballot and someone with as much clout as Stacy Abrams and her fair fight, why didn't they just tell the people to cure their ballot?
Exactly.
Like, you had time to do it.
Yes.
Like, there were out of the 8,000, that's how come the number dwindled from 20 to 13 when it came to people who voted for President Trump because these people went and cured their ballot.
Oh, yeah. She had the time, she had the resources, she had the means, and she had the manpower
and
to do it.
And she chose. In my opinion, she chose. She made a decision.
It's essentially this is what it sounded like, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just to be able to push through this lawsuit. So the second prong of this issue is the inaccurate voting registration records. Essentially, they were saying that people were coming up, and it wasn't just voters who had been voting forever. It was even new citizens that had just gotten their citizenship rights and that had not been able to have their information input into the DMV system at the time to then be able to get their voter registration. I can understand that point. I can understand that point in a slight degree. If you are a new citizen, then you wholeheartedly, 100%, unquestionably deserve the right to vote. I can understand that slightly. However, what they are trying to do here with this issue right here is they're trying to bring forward and they're trying to institute same-day voter registration.
So, and here's my argument with that, right? Because I know from friends of mine who hold permanent green cards that when you get a permanent green card, if you don't have an ID or passport or anything of that nature, you're given some kind of documentation. And to add to that, as someone who lost their ID and who, just doesn't like going to the DMV, who used their passport, right? So I used my passport, scanned in first time, damaged my passport, couldn't scan in the second time, had to get a ballot because also bogus Brad said that I got sent an absentee ballot. Okay. Anyway, long story short, when I voted the last 2 cycles, I used my passport, which is a separate documentation. It allowed me to go in and fill out a regular ballot. Okay.
Or provisional ballot.
Provisional ballot.
Yes.
That was still sent in. When bogus Brad said that I got an absentee ballot when I didn't, okay, they told me that I couldn't go through the regular situation, like go to the box. I need to fill out a provisional absentee ballot. So then I went to the room, filled out, everything was fine, verified it with the Board of Elections, and the staff there told me everything was okay and my vote counted. And then I went on to helping people a couple weeks later with curing their ballot. My real question is if how can something like this happen in 2018 and similar, almost identical situations happen in 2020, but we're willing to listen to the Democrats say that this is a problem, but when we as Republicans bring it up, it's no issue and we cheated?
Oh, I can answer that one. It's in all honesty, it's quite simple. It's really all about I guess the messaging behind it. If you are quote unquote the party for the people and you're trying to stand up for these disenfranchised voters, if you're trying to stand up for the quote unquote or you're trying to stand against the racist voters, then you're seen as being the hero of and the saviors of the world. But but in actuality, they are the ones that are causing all these issues. They're the ones that are actually propagating all of these issues. They're the ones that are trying to expand these rights to people who have no right to have these rights. Even Brad Raffensperger said that in the past 5 years, there's been almost 1,500 illegal immigrants that have tried to register to vote. I can guarantee you that there were several of these illegal immigrants that got driver's license that were able to register to vote. I can guarantee you 100% that they were.
That's all like what Texas is doing. Did you see what Texas did this week?
What's that?
The governor of Texas
sent them up to D.C.?
The governor of Texas said that you don't believe we have an immigration problem here, and started busing the illegal immigrants who they caught up to Washington, D.C. and dropping them off.
The funny thing about it is my former teacher, DeSantis, is going to be doing the same thing as well.
Absolutely amazing. Amazing.
So we'll allow them to we'll allow them to handle that issue up there. They want to try and flood Texas, try and flood Florida, flying these illegal immigrants in under the dead of night and by these unregistered and undocumented flights throughout the entire country,
and we never got
just sneaking them in everywhere.
We never got to talk about that, which is part
We've
of the
got an
problem.
episode on this, but we haven't been able to put it out just yet. That's going to have to be one of the ones that we do. We're going to have to put out with one of our special releases.
Yeah. Because it's honestly, y'all, they're literally, Joe Biden and his administration are literally flying illegal immigrants in by plane, unmarked plane by night. Sheriff's officers are are showing up because there's no flight log of these planes are coming in. And then you got federal bureaucrats who are like, I don't know, man, I'm just doing my job.
It's Joe Biden's fault.
It's Joe Biden's fault. Like I'm just here. I'm
Look
just
at
here to
who
make
the
a living.
administration is. But yeah, that's what they're trying to do. That's what they're moving towards. They're trying to get it to where they can have all of these illegal ballots, all these people who do not deserve the right to have a say in our elections or to have a say in our governmental process. They're trying to ensure that, or they're wanting them to have the right to do this. They're wanting to make sure that every single person out there that walks, breathes, moves legally or illegally out there has a ballot in their hand, and not just one, but at least 4 or 5.
They're going to destroy this country, and we have to stop it.
Absolutely. And that starts with us here in Georgia this year.
And that goes back to what we've been saying this entire time. If you sit at home and you do not vote, regardless of who your nominee is for the Republican, you're the problem.
It's your fault. If Stacy Abram gets elected and you didn't vote because you were mad because you didn't get the right nominee, anything that she does is your fault. And you will be held accountable for that.
We got to get out and vote. Because
Absolutely.
everything that we've talked about this entire show goes back to you being engaged, you being involved, you being at your local meetings, you're being at your state meetings, you get involved, and regardless of who your nominee is voting on principle. And their principles are not the same as ours.
Nope.
They don't believe in the same things as we do.
Nope.
And we have to make sure that we stand up for it, regardless of who the nominee is.
110%. I'll put it this way. It was because of our elections that we now have constitutional carry, because people got engaged and they got active and they got out and did it.
Yep.
So, as always, concluding out a little bit and finishing out things, please continue to like and share all of our content that we put out there and everything that we produce. Subscribe to all of our platforms that you see us on. We're literally just about everywhere on every single platform. We've even been picked up by Spotify. And we're even on.
We're national
now.
now.
We're national now.
And media credentialed.
Exactly. Jamie, can you believe that they actually gave Jamie and I national press credentials? I mean, really?
I feel bad for some people.
Yeah, this could get interesting. I'll put it that way. Could get interesting.
Well, rooms we couldn't get in before, we can get in now.
Oh, yeah. So, and if you're able to, please go to our website, conservativestalk.org. It's spelled out below you, right below our desk here. And help us out where you can. 5, 10, 15, anything goes a long way in helping Jamie and I to be able to produce this.
We produce this content for you, and the only way we can continue it is with you.
Absolutely.
So help us get this message out. Go to Conservatives Talk, conservatives with an S, .org, and click the sponsor button.
Absolutely. And as always, we appreciate you putting up with our shenanigans and sticking through and listening to everything. And we hope to see you again next week.